Middle school didn't start as awkwardly as my yearbook picture would have led you to believe, but it provided a fresh start. The school was brand new, halls pristine, textbooks never used, lots of teachers who just focused on one subject. I remember 3 subjects that year. World geography. While the content didn't jump up and grab my interest every day, in my mind's wandering, I found a useful table in the appendix that showed the major languages spoken in African countries. While Swahili was a common language on this table, I knew that I would never learn that at a Texas school. But je peux parler français là-bas? Choir. I gleefully sang the songs that Mrs. Laporte selected. I even looked forward to 7th grade when I could sing an SWV ballad as a quartet of sisters had done at our school concert. Needless to say, they stole the show and made us all weak in the knees as they sang that song. I digress. English. The highlight of 6th grade was really Mrs. Harold, my first and only Black teacher in all of my education, kindergarten through 12th grade. In an effort to further engage me in academics, she encouraged me to participate in her after-school program, the literary magazine. I don't think I knew what to expect, but man, this opened up the doors for me to develop my writing craft, which didn't start out as much. But her endearing smile motivated me to not despise the days of small beginnings. I continued to work on this magazine the entire time I was in middle school. About this same time, the African proverb rang true in my own life. It takes a village to raise a child. At church, I was given Black history books for birthdays and Christmas, and my interest was piqued as it had not been before in literature. If I am honest, I did not like to read because it was boring and laborious. But when my eyes fell upon the history that I was not learning in school, my mind's thirst for knowledge was quenched and left panting for more. This newfound interest spilled into the classroom through projects with student choice. My research presentation schooled my classmates on the inventions of African Americans like A. Miles with the elevator and Garrett A. Morgan with the stoplight. And while my reading comprehension was not on the same level as my abilities to factor binomials with exponents in math, I struggled to draw conclusions on why we spent so much time learning about Anne Frank and the Holocaust and the mistreatment of the Jews, which was bad, but literally took place thousands of miles away from the very soil that my ancestors picked cotton and endured egregious treatment for generations upon generations over the span of 200 plus years. We, with signed permission slips, watched Schindler's List to help us better understand the times of Hitler. Yet we did not read much beyond a page or two here or there about the atrocities of slavery, the oppression faced during the Reconstruction period and the early 20th century, or the decades-long fight for equality that ensued after as we dealt with the repercussions of Jim Crow. No movie was ever watched in middle school classrooms to better paint a picture in our minds of the hardships that African Americans faced along the journey to equality. So it is no surprise that people reflect on Dr. King with rose-colored glasses. Yes, he non-violently marched with others for equality, but don't you remember? Police and governors met him and others with blunt force and violence. Children's clothes were ripped from their slender bodies by fierce dogs who looked hungry for their first meal of the day. Students' bodies were slammed against brick walls by the powerful force of hoses, fire hoses meant to put out flames on houses, and momentums for movements. These images were shown in American homes in the 60s, and as difficult as they may have been to watch, they elicited action from a silent majority who were at times unaware, at times complicit, and at times unbothered. But as my teachers neglected to share this part of history with my classmates and I saw another generation funneled through an education system ignorant and doomed to repeat lessons unlearned because they simply and legislatively were not taught. Then there was my first love, music. Seventh grade choir was full of wonder and awe with the addition of Mrs. Panessa, the choir teacher with a Cinderella-like voice who allowed me to sing soprano 1 on some songs that would reach the stratosphere. She never spoke to me about the tone or color of my voice or discouraged me from competitions. Thank you. This was in stark contrast to my choir professor in college, who made me sing alto because, according to him, the color of my voice didn't quite match the lighter sounds his sopranos made. Opportunity denied. Did he not know that I had mastered the art of blending in to not stand out? I've been doing that since second grade. Or did he not think I was capable of changing the color and tone of my voice so that I could switch from the choir songs that we sang in school to the more improvised, passionate, guttural songs sung at church that use more of the chest voice than the head voice? 2 long Texas summers were spent attending Kelly's Youth Center. Many a day was spent keeping the 8 ball out of the corner pocket before all the striped balls had been put away. But we also went twice a week to a pool to take swimming lessons. Some things I apprehend quickly, while others need a little more time to settle in. But for whatever reason, I never learned to swim, despite following the instructions, isolating my arm strokes and my kicks, overcoming any fears of the water, being willing to dive to the bottom of the pool to capture rings. Still, I did not learn how to swim during these lessons. And as a result, stayed in the shallow end with my brother on our trips to the pool. In 8th grade, we got a new choir teacher who could not play the piano, nor could she sing. And for the first time, I questioned how a teacher got a job. Over the years, this question has been pondered many a times, but not just in education. And the answers I have come up with at times have been a trigger because of the many times that access was denied to a person like me, a person who looks like me, with all of the required and desired qualifications, but they simply took the job in a different direction. But in 8th grade, more lessons were learned outside of the classroom than inside. I learned that while velocity is calculated as distance divided by time, an unseen cop can clock a car at 20 miles over the speed limit shown on a dashboard when your mom is driving 60 miles per hour in a 1993 Land Cruiser in Arkansas, and another cop writes the ticket. And as he wrote out her ticket, I stared blankly at the notebook paper that I had been using to calculate her speed with a formula I learned in Algebra 2. But just like infinity is a number that cannot be fully expressed, I could not fully express or calculate why he was allowed to write this erroneous ticket. But she complied, despite this lie, and I learned that sometimes we just go with things that we know aren't right. That year, I was also inducted into the National Junior Honor Society. And while it was an honor, I knew that real honors classes had been inaccessible to me because I was not on the gifted and talented track. You see, the 3 years that teachers refused to even test me for the gifted and talented program meant that in middle school, I was predestined to only take regular classes, with the exception of math. In education, students often get put on tracks before parents even realize the missed opportunities. I've taught in schools where the robotics club was only an option for students in the gifted and talented program. I've been told that this black girl who I see giftedness in is not actually a gifted and talented student. No, she's just a smart student, and she doesn't need to be tested. I've fought for students to be tested who would have been denied because the gifted and talented coordinator put the wrong deadline on the application form. And the principal was fine with this. I fought for students to get tested who the gifted and talented coordinator said was tested last year and she wasn't GT. Yet everything I see in the classroom from this student shows me that she gets things that no one else understands. And when I fought for these students, they all got in. And while I hate labels, I detest even more the denial of enriching opportunities because someone else cannot see a child's potential, especially when the child has brown skin, especially when the child does not look like the majority already in the program. By the time a child reaches high school, getting into honors classes becomes even more important. At my Texas high school, honors courses meant an extra 5 points added to your semester average. An extra 8 points were added if it was an advanced placement honors class. Who was automatically matriculated into these honors classes? Yep, the same kids that were automatically added in middle school.